Hi everybody, welcome to our group critique for Milestone 3. What we're going to be doing in this particular group critique is just looking at everybody's caricature projects, and in this particular phase we're taking a big leap where we're finally putting our character together in Photoshop and using the photographs that you have selected or revised. And then what you're doing is you're putting your character together using layer masks. And yeah, and so that's the main thing. And you're also going to be putting your name on the character just in simple text. Next week, what we will be doing is we'll be adding the next layer of or level of design. We're going to be designing the text a little bit more and then adding a background. So that's what we'll be focusing on next week. But for this week, it's just really about putting the character together. And so we're going to be looking at the layer masks themselves, see what we can do to perfect them if we need to. We'll take a look at the design of the character, and in general at this stage most people are in the rough draft phase, so we'll see, what can we do to make the character better. Maybe you need to rethink some parts of it or replace some of the photographs. That's typical at this stage. So really keep an open mind to feedback. There is going to always be things that you need to change in a project like this. It is really the nature of design. I think that's one of the very first things that surprised me about being in a design environment as opposed to a fine art environment. In a fine art environment, a lot of it is really just your particular vision for, in my case, I like to paint. And so it's just it's my vision. It's like nobody can really advise me on what to do in general. But in design, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to communicate in a more sort of service-oriented way. By service-oriented, I mean we're really solving a problem for a client or our art director, and so we're trying to really develop a skill that communicates, and that is a pretty different process than what is the fine art creative process, which a lot of people who come to design actually have a background in fine arts. I know I did. A lot of people do, where you've just been really a creative person and you've just done your own thing and you've really explored things on your own. Um, and so moving into design is where we're more collaborative. It's not so independent. And it is still, there is an independent, like a lot of people still work very independently in design, but there's a collaborative element where we get a lot of feedback. Like you'll send a design to a client and your client will say, oh yeah, I'd like you, I don't know, and they give you a lot of feedback and then you have to incorporate it. Or, give them a good argument about why the design you've created for them is really strong based on your training as a designer. So we've got that kind of thing going on where, and I'm just sort of prefacing this to say, feedback is just a really normal part in design. And the sooner you can just feel comfortable with that and, get your bearings and feel a sense of balance with that, I think the faster you're going to advance as a designer. And that doesn't mean that you have to follow somebody else's advice on your design. You have to use your critical thinking skills to decide what works. But in general, if somebody says, I think that maybe this upper right-hand part needs a certain something to happen, sometimes people will give you suggestions based on their own way that they would solve a problem, which is what I sometimes do in this class because of the time constraints of this class, that we don't have a lot of time for me to just say keep working on that. I like to provide concrete suggestions, and sometimes I think it's really helpful too. But you can sort of take a certain kind of like, oh, that needs to be worked on a little bit more, and then you can solve it your own way because there's like hundreds of ways that you can fix a certain area. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's kind of like somebody pointing to the fact that your design needs maybe a little more revising, and then you can take the reins and decide how that goes, or sometimes you can. So this is the classroom in a book exercise for task 1, which is where you're learning about things like puppet warp and layer masks and all that kind of stuff. And I apologize because what happened between the last time I taught this class and this time, which was really only a few weeks, is that Adobe changed this particular chapter so that the videos and our examples in the instructions look a little different. There's a different model the model looks different. But in general, there's a lot of things that are the same. The background's the same and the general tasks are the same. So you can still continue to use the video tutorials for this assignment. But I just wanted to point out that I think the model is different for this assignment. And so so essentially you can use the textbook in conjunction with the video tutorials, or you can use the video tutorials on their own or the textbook steps on their own. It's up to you. They're really the same thing. But what you're going to do is you're going to complete, I'm actually going to just, if you don't mind, I'm just going to turn off these layers here. This is what it's going to look like approximately. Yours might look a tiny bit different, but this is how it's going to look approximately when you're done. Then the additional assignment instructions are going to have you add an additional photo. And this is where you want to make sure that you're adding a photo and then you're going to hide the background using a layer mask. Now this is a little bit confusing because in the classroom in a book exercise, because of the nature of the steps, the background, even though you're using a layer mask, the background actually gets deleted. That's unfortunate for the classroom in a book. But when you're adding it, what's gonna happen? I right-clicked here to disable the layer mask, and you can see, oh look, here's the background. So the background was actually just hidden with the layer mask, and this is what you want to be doing for any time you add a photo. Is you want to try to, if you're masking something, you want to try to use a layer mask like this without deleting the background, because this is what's called non-destructive editing. So now you can go back and like make changes, you know, and you won't have to like find that photo again if you want to make a change to the layer mask. So this is what it's going to look like. So if I have some feedback in your comments area in the task submission for this saying you need to use a layer mask, this is what you're aiming for. Now, how can you get that? I recommend using the video tutorial for the caricature project that we're going to be critiquing later, because that actually has a really excellent video on how to really quickly mask a photograph, and so you can just use that video for this assignment. Okay, so I'm going to enable this again. So that's what you're going to be adding. You're also going to be adding a shadow, just like you did the shadow of the girl. So you can just add one. You can put it in approximately the same place. It's nice to be able to do that. Then the final thing you're going to be doing here is you're going to be adding an adjustment layer to somehow, you know, change the color of your added photo. And you can do whatever you want with that. And I'm going to click this on to show you. There it is. That's the change. That's the adjustment layer. And we did adjustment layers at least 1 week. Last week we did layer, I think it was last week we added an adjustment layer into the postcard, and it's exactly the same process where you add an adjustment layer, you make sure to clip it just like we did last week. And there's also in the learning path for this week, hold on, the learning week, the milestone 3 learning path has adjustment layers in it as well if you want to learn more. Okay, so okay, that's it. So let me know if you have any questions about anything that we've covered in terms of this assignment. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense, and you'll be able to, if you need to, make the necessary revisions. Oh, just a couple additional notes, general notes. The first thing is that I put together just a video on refining the mask for the hair in task 1 for the model's hair. That's a little tricky, so I put together a video to someone in the class, and I think it was Aaron, and so that's on the announcements board if you want to check that out. The other thing I want to mention too is I've noticed there's been a lot of comments that this particular milestone is a little more challenging, and that's true. It's not your imagination. We do make a bit of a jump from last week to this week, which is the layer masks. So just be patient with the process. You know, the more you practice the layer mask, like if you have a few minutes here or there in your day or in your week, just grab a photograph, like anything from the internet or something you have, and just put on a layer mask. Like just use the steps to create a layer mask from this the instructions for this particular assignment for task 2 and just create a layer mask. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll get. And then once you've done it like half a dozen times, it'll really start becoming quite easy, and then you'll experience the magic and wonder of layer masks because they really are pretty cool. So again, we're taking a big step, but I know you guys can do it. Okay, so let's get going here in Photoshop. Okay, you said the only part you struggled with was rotating the images. Okay, yeah, rotating the images. That's definitely something that's going to be really useful to do in the assignment, is know how to rotate. So maybe we'll look at that. Okay, so as I mentioned in my introduction, the main thing for this assignment is the layer masks. Something that I like to do for Photoshop on my end, like in my preferences, you'll notice that I have the thumbnails large here. You can see them really big. And what I do is I go into, let's see here if I can show this more clearly. I go right in here all the way down to, it's below the recording screen, but in this menu all the way down to panel options. If you click on panel options, you can see that your thumbnail size, you can choose it. By default, I think it's the smallest, but I always bump it up to the biggest, because that way when I get into Photoshop, you can see here how easy it is to see now all of the work you have done on a layer. It's much easier to see when these are bigger. So automatically so when I look here at Alma's file, I can see, oh look, there are the layer masks. So on the left hand side, I can see the photograph, the original photograph. That's what you want to be seeing here. And then on the right hand side, you can see that a layer mask has been applied. And so if we disable the layer mask, the photograph will appear, the whole thing. That's what we want to have happen. Okay, so I can see that. So you've got your layer mask, which is great. So that's really, again, that's the most important thing for this assignment. Once you have the layer masks in place, then you can continue to experiment with the design. Like you can go in to the design, for example. I'm using the selection tool here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the shovel here, and it's going to show me the layers. I think I may have done this before in a critique, I don't remember, but it'll show you the layers underneath that. And so the first layer is the arm shovel. So if I click on that, you can see in the layers panel it goes to that layer, automatically. So I always do that step rather than, especially when you get more layers, this is not that many, you can easily go through them, but when you've got more layers, it's makes it a lot faster to do that step, because then again you'll get that step done automatically. So now that we have this layer selected, let's say we want to rotate this. So what we can then do, I'm going to use Command or Control T, which is a shortcut. Okay, or you can go up to, hold on a second here. You can go up to the Edit panel, which is also above my recording screen, but if you go to the Edit panel and then you go down to here, you can see there's the Transform, and so you can go in there as well. I just like Free Transform for this, which is Command or Control T, which is the shortcut. Okay, so let's just do that, and then what you can do here is you can just rotate, just like and easily. And then when you want to make something bigger or smaller, it's the same. You can stay right here, but what you want to do is you want to hold down the Shift key so that you can expand or make something smaller without accidentally stretching it. If you don't hold the Shift key down, then I'm not able to stretch it right now for some reason, but you can, I think because I have that selected, but you'll sort of kind of move it out of its original proportions, so it might look kind of strange. Anyhow, okay, that was just like a general comment to everybody. Okay, so good. You've got your layer mask. Something I like to do at this point with the layer masks. So if you look in the layer panel right here, you'll notice that all of the backgrounds are white. That's just fine to have them, a white background makes it easier to select, but it doesn't need to be white. Really, any color will do for a background. But when you have white and then you have a white background, what happens with that combination of things, a white background in your photo and then a white background, is it can be hard to see the accuracy of the layer mask. You know, if you remember back when we did selections back in week 1, how, you know, we were trying to get really accurate selections. So what I like to do is I like to go into the background, and I'm going to just unlock it here, right there. So I'm going to click on the background layer, and this is just on my end just to kind of see things. What I do is I just take a rectangle and then, you know, just make it sort of like, give it like a dark, maybe a dark background. Doesn't really matter what color, but you know, some kind of dark background. And then I just take a rectangle and then I just, you know, put the background, and I can remove this later. You can also do this on a separate layer as well. Like create a new layer to create this rectangle that you can turn on and off. That's actually easier to do. In fact, I'm going to do that because I think that's going to help me out here. So I'm going to just create another layer right there. And on this layer, I'll do this. So then I can toggle it on and off. So now with this layer, we can kind of go in and we can see if there's anything else we need to clean up. Because next week, when we add our background, we won't have a white background. Then we'll start to see areas on our mask that we might need to fix. So we're just kind of doing this in advance. And there's only a couple areas here that I see need to be fixed. The first one, can you see this line right here? This line, you can do a really great, like, I think your masking technique looks pretty good overall. But this line is something that happens, there it is. So it happens on its own. I'm not quite sure why it happens, but sometimes, like, there's a line of pixels around the very edge of your photograph that can sometimes be left behind. And so the first thing is to figure out, where does it happen? And so you notice I moved the body, and I just wanted to find out, where does it come from? And it comes from the body. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to manually fix this by actually painting on the mask itself. So I'm going to click directly on the mask for this image. So you can click, there's 2 places to click here. There's the photograph, and when you click on the photograph, you can do things that will modify the photograph. But I want to modify the mask. So I'm going to click on the mask here. And then when I do that, whenever I click on the mask, any of the masks, it will automatically change. You notice now here, instead of colors, I've got black and white in my color picker. Photoshop does that automatically because I'm going to want to paint either on black or white on my layer mask. And so I'm going to use let's see, I'm going to use black to hide. So black hides and white reveals. So I hope I've got that right. Sometimes I confuse that. So I'm going to go to grab a paintbrush, because now the paintbrush is going to operate like, you know, a paintbrush that's going to work on the layer mask. So now I'm just going to grab this. If you need to paint with white, you can always reverse these, but I want black. And now I'm going to go over, you see that? How it's actually erasing that line. So that's what you want to do here. If you notice anywhere else, for anybody, if you see those little lines, that's all you need to do is click on that layer mask, take your black color here and a paintbrush and just wipe it away. Okay? And that works in anything. And we're going to do that again here. So I noticed there's kind of a lot of, I don't know how that happened. There's a lot of sort of halo around your legs. Which we definitely want to address. Now, I'm not 100% sure why that happened. Sometimes, so when there's a lot like this, like you've got a lot that you want to work on, you can manually work on it. Like I can go here and click on this layer mask, and now I can take and I can go. I've got the black selected here, and I can like get a smaller brush here, and I can go through and like spend a lot of time. Can you see how I'm like cleaning that edge up by applying the mask? But that's quite tedious. You know, it's going to take you a long time to do that. So sometimes when something like this happens, and sometimes weird things can happen with the mask. Sometimes what I like to do is to just delete the layer mask itself here and just start over. Maybe my second time around will work better. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to drag it to the trash here. And I'm just going to delete it. Okay. So Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, hold on here, I'm going to turn off these other layers. Now we're just working on this. Oh, it's interesting. Hold on, I'm going to just go back a few steps here. So I'm going to go back here. I see here. So, okay, so I'm just, the reason why I wanted to go back is to see that you actually deleted, I see. So with your layer mask, you sort of, what did you kind of, you just wanted the legs right up to here. Okay, that, no problem. We'll just keep that in mind that you want to remove everything except the legs. Okay, let's go back here and get rid of this. Okay, so so I would just go through then with the quick selection tool, and I'm going to just select all of the legs here, and I might turn off the recording in a minute so you don't have to watch all this, but let's just, yeah, let me just do that. So I have been going through, now this particular photograph, because the background in places is so similar in value to what we want to select, I am noticing that I'm getting, and I think you probably ran into this, like where we can turn this, if I use Option or Alt, then I can remove things. So I kind of needed to go and remove things, kind of add things. It took a while. So if you don't get it completely right at the beginning, that's okay. You can always fix it. But I always like to try to get as much as I possibly can. I'm going to make this brush a little smaller in the first go because it just makes it easier. So just really kind of going through, you can see I really have to go through these edges. Some images really you can just kind of basically run over them. I'm a little concerned that it's going to go too much here, but you know, I'm just going to really try to carefully add what I can here. And I think that's probably why you ran into the situation you did. Okay, so I have a lot of it selected. So sometimes in this situation, if you love this image, then you're willing to put in the time. I think this is a pretty cool image, so maybe, you know, but if you find that, this is true, a general comment for everybody, if you find when you're doing this that the image just doesn't really lend itself to being selected, which, you know, happens, again, it's always because the background and parts of the image or all of the image is so similar in color. But you can just go through here and so notice it kind of over selected there, so I'm just going to go back. Anyhow, so that's all I'm going to do here, and then I'm going to hit that layer mask and see what we've got. Okay, so there's the selection, and we can sort of start kind of turning things on. Here it is. So that is what I would do here, is I'd go back and redo that and get rid of that halo. Okay? All right, so then what you can do is you can like further, you know, you can do a little more masking, because it looks like here there's a little bit of a glitch there, right there, so I can, you know, do that trick I did before, which is paint that out, you know, on the layer mask. Okay, so that's what I would do there. And hopefully that's going to be helpful to other folks. So I think that will really help fix your layer mask. Then the next thing I would do is I'd make sure to add your name, because that's one of the requirements here. And then the other thing is I might just play with your design a little bit more. Like one thing I noticed here is that the shark's head doesn't feel like it's necessarily connected to the body as yet. So I might play with that a little bit more. What can I do here? Like automatically, you know, you mentioned that like maybe I need to turn this somehow, you know, and then so now sort of like it looks like it's sort of like that rounded piece looks like it's coming out now of the head, and maybe I'll need to shrink everything to make it fit, but that works a lot better. The other thing too is I might decide to use just one of these elements and duplicate it, like have two lobster arms, which I think would look super cute, because I think that's a really cute element. So I might just do that. Like, again, I might rotate this just a little bit to see if I can connect it. We talked a lot about symmetry for a couple, a little bit before, and I think that would help your character to have two lobster arms. So to do that, it's super easy. Once you have, like you have a layer mask on this, you don't need to redo that. All you need to do is grab this layer, this one right here, and pull it down to the little folding page, which will duplicate it. See there, we have it duplicated. Now what I can do is I can, transform it. So I can go and I can rotate it this way, or I can, flip it, in the transform area. So it's super easy to do something like that. You can flip it 180 degrees, or pardon me, flip horizontal, so that if you want this to be the thumb to be above. Okay, all right. Well, thank you for letting me work on your project so much. I always tend to use assignments to just give general comments to everybody. So, in yours, working on the layer mask and other kinds of things. Okay, so that's what I would probably do with your character in terms of, again, you can definitely find other ways to kind of connect these upper body parts. I think the bottom looks really good. But just to give you some idea of how you might start making it look more cohesive and like a living kind of creature. And don't forget to put the name somewhere in your design. Doesn't matter where. It can be super, you just basically grab the text tool, which is, I have hidden somewhere here. There it is, text tool, just kind of pop it in there. You can just make the type a little bit bigger. Doesn't matter what kind of text it is. We're going to work on the design later, so just put the, Terrible Toys Todd in there somewhere. Okay? Aaron, all right, so you have your pastry character, and looks like you've got all of your layer masks here, which is awesome. Maybe not for the, looks like somehow the baguettes maybe the layer mask got lost in there. The reason why I can see that there isn't a layer mask, and it looks like the background is deleted. So I would just go back. It looks like you know how to do that really nicely now. So I'd go back and do that. So I am going to, so here's the layer. You were probably working, the pixels, it's fine to have a pixel background. It really doesn't matter in terms of your character, but it is oftentimes a little easier to see if you just have some background filled in. I'm going to do what I did with Alma's project. I'm going to add another layer in here so that I can just pop in the background and just see the layer masks. And what we're looking for is we just want to have nice clean selection edges, which to me it looks like these are really good. So in terms of your layer masks, I would just say work on these, the baguettes. Okay, let's look at your character here. Yeah, that looks really, I think the design looks good. What is this? I'm not 100% sure what this element is. You might need to work on that a little bit more. Maybe it's a tail, or you might have to experiment with that. But overall, I think it looks good. In terms of your design, we don't need this anymore. We'll just get rid of that. I would make it a little bigger, like fill your page a little bit more with the space. I'm going to just do a quick, just to show you what I mean. I'd probably just go and make everything a little bit bigger, but you just want to fill the page. Get your name in there, just like we talked about. You want to make sure to have your, whatever the name of your character is from Milestone 1. But you can see here that just by doing this, it brings your whole character to life a lot more. So those are the main things here that I would work on. Just this and adding in your name. And yeah, let me see here what's going on with this edge here. So yeah, so when we mask things, what we're looking for is just something that looks as, we don't necessarily have to have everything in the design, or in the photograph. But when I look at something, I sort of looked at this edge and thought, there looks to be like something maybe missing there. And then when I look at the photograph, I do see, yes, there is this little bit of missing edge here. So that's something that's really fun to, and easy to fix. What you do is you just click on that layer mask, and again, it changes the colors here to black and white. And your case, I don't want to mask more. I actually want to mask less. So I'm going to turn it to white so that I can remove some of the mask. And I'm going to take the paintbrush tool again. Again, you can make it, I'm going to make it a little smaller. I use the bracket tools. Now you can use the tools above here to make it smaller, but I use the bracket tool on my keyboard because it's faster. You can see it gets bigger or smaller depending upon the left or right bracket. So I might go really, kind of small. Actually, I might even go a little bit big here. I find it easier to kind of go over the mask like this so I can see more of the edge, right here. And then what I do is I flip it, and then I can come back in here. I can zoom in, and I can come back in here with a small little brush, and then I can carefully, because I now know where the edge is because I've overdrawn it. Do you know what I mean? Because if you don't overdraw it, you don't actually know where that edge is. And then you can kind of come in here. I could probably zoom in a little bit more. I'm doing this quite quickly. But then you can just remove that background manually, because now what I'm doing is I'm actually painting on that layer mask, and I'm painting back the mask. So I'm actually manually working on the mask. So Photoshop does a pretty good job of creating masks, like with selection tools. It's pretty smart, but it doesn't always do everything perfectly. So it's good to know that you can go in here and actually adjust the mask. I could probably zoom in a little bit more, just, you can see, just kind of clean that up a little bit. Okay, yeah, and anywhere else you can zoom in. This is good for something. Anybody, if you want to do this on your edges, kind of look at your edges and see, because that looks pretty good. You can sort of experiment. How's this edge doing here? The more detailed edge you have, that looks, yeah, to me that looks really good. Yeah. Okay, maybe in here a bit you could work on, but you can sort of figure that out. It's just kind of fun if you're like working on, if you have some time, maybe you're watching TV or something like that, where you can just have your Photoshop document open. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to click. There we go. I wanted a paintbrush. Where's the paintbrush? There we go. So maybe you can see a little bit of the mask that's the background showing there, so I could maybe go in here and kind of clean that up. Yeah, I messed that up a little bit. Okay. All right, well, I hope that helps. I think you're really on the right track here. This is really totally normal working with masks the way we're doing today. Once you get your layer mask in here, then what we call non-destructive editing. It means you can always come back and kind of clean things up or remove things or do whatever you want. So that's the key first thing. And so, yeah, all right, good job. Okay, Keith. All right, so yep, you've got your layer masks. Great, that looks good. Again, it's most important thing here. I'm going to actually do exactly what I did to the other students here. And again, this is something you guys can do if you want to see your edges a little bit more clearly. You can just go down to the bottom, create a new layer, and then throw that a dark, just any dark background behind your character, just to kind of fine-tune things. And you can see here now it really helps, again, because so many of our backgrounds are created with our photographs have lighter backgrounds, so it really helps. So overall, I think this looks really pretty good. I just see one little kind of thing here, maybe right there, a little bit on your pumpkin, and that's really easy to fix just using the methods we've done before, where you just again click on that layer mask, take a brush. The brush and the quick selection tool look very similar, so it's good to kind of keep in mind. I always do this, I click on the quick selection tool and then it doesn't operate the way I want to. And then you can see you can just go in here and fix this manually. Again, choosing to work on it manually or let Photoshop do it by using the selection tools. It's just a matter of preference. I tend to work on the mask if I know it's going to be pretty quick. Okay, let's look at the design then, since I think your masks are looking pretty good. So with the face, it looks like you have painted a face onto the pumpkin, which in normal kinds of in normal or normal other sort of more free-form types of projects where you don't have requirements, that would be a great solution. But for this class, we have to work with objects, right? So we cannot paint or illustrate. We can't use illustrations. We can't create illustrations in our designs. We are just wanting to work strictly with Photoshop. So if I actually think this looks pretty good without the face, but if you want a face on your character, just go to Google Images and type in like jack-o'-lantern or carved pumpkin or something like that, so that you can get one that's a pumpkin that already is carved. And there's so many wonderful images on Google Images. I think you'll easily find one. So that's a solution here. So you can either leave it as is or find something else. I think the gourd looks really good. I might play with symmetry for yours as well, like choose which arm you want to work with, like is it this one or is it this one, and just duplicate it just like we did before, where you grab the layer, maybe a banana or gourd, whichever you decide, eggplant I should say, just so that you get more symmetry. It will automatically make your design, like your character, come to life. It's sort of like the symmetry helps the viewer see the character as living. And it moves it from being a collection of objects to being something that's alive. You'll notice it. So just choose one of these two. I think the knife is a good touch. And again, just it's very easy to do. Just like I mentioned before, you just grab your object itself. If you choose the eggplant, then you would just hold the photograph, grab it and pull it down to the duplicate layer, which is looks like a little page turning, and you have automatically another duplicate that you can use. And then if you go up to hold on a second here, the transform, you can actually flip it horizontal, I think is what I want. There we go. Flip horizontal, and then it kind of looks more like it belongs. Okay, so I thought it looks really good. The banana would look good too, but it's up to you. The other thing I might do too, something that can make sometimes, so you can sort of play with it, like how do you attach an object to your body? Sometimes it can work. I think it works pretty good. Like when you have a rounded edge, it kind of looks like it sort of is attaching because of that roundness. Something else you can experiment with is moving it behind the torso right here. So I would just drag this layer behind the torso, and sometimes that can look good too, like it makes it look attached. So you can think about that, what you think looks best. Those are two typical options. That looks pretty good too, actually. Maybe that looks more like it's kind of more like a leg attaching sort of underneath. Same with the arms. You can do the same thing. You can pull them behind, and that can look really natural. Okay, all right. Well, I think you're definitely on the right track here. You're where you need to be. Just experiment with those things. Make sure you add the name of the character. If you've got a little space above here, below, whichever where you want it. Kivana, yeah, so for this assignment, yeah, it looks like you've got a good start here where you've got your, objects into the project or into the file, which is good. And now you just want to select them. So the best video for this assignment, the best video instruction is actually in the instructions. So if you go back to the learning path right here in the instructions, this video here is excellent. It's really not very long. It's 4.5 minutes, and it's literally going to just help you understand how to create the mask. It's like, yeah, it's really, it was done by another instructor, and she did a wonderful job. So check that out. That's what you need to do here. And I think overall, so you can keep the drawing in your file, but I would probably turn it off at some point. And so this image, this, and this image too, and then the mushrooms I think are also all going to be good images. But these two images here, like I mentioned, I think I mentioned previously to you, I would not use these images. I think they're going to be very hard to make work. Because they don't have, like, they're kind of cut off and they don't have good edges. So I would just get rid of these. And then what I would do instead is I'd find something else for your feet. I know that with your character sketch that you were using the tree trunks for feet. Just find something else, just kind of experiment, maybe a branch, or, like, something that's long that relates to your character. But the main thing is I would, you don't even need to find something right now for that. I would just start with your layer mask using that instructional video. If you need help, just head over to our tutoring service, which are located up in the help menu right here, the Thinking Storm. There's one-on-one tutors. But that video, this video right here is awesome. So start with that and just practice your masking. Set aside some time and just work on the masking, and just keep experimenting with it. Hey, Daphne, Joy, and Eric. So both of you have a really nice, I think, character design. You might want to make yours a bit bigger, Daphne. But I think both of them look really good. The thing that both of you want to work on a little bit more is the layer mask. So Daphne, Joy, what you have here is you have the background deleted rather than the layer mask. Actually here, okay, and here you started to actually add that layer mask, which is great. And here too, actually, look at that. So okay, that's perfect. So that's what you want to do with all of yours, is to just make sure that you have a layer mask to hide the background. Okay, so because it looks like, again, right now you have, in a lot of cases, the background deleted. So just go back here. The easiest thing is to just remove these guys anywhere you have you don't have a layer mask. Just kind of, you can drag it into the trash, and then just right down here, and then bring in that photograph again, and then use that video that I just talked about from this assignment to just walk through adding a layer mask. And if you run into any problems, just head over to the online help and go to Thinking Storm. There's live tutoring. It's a free service, and somebody can work with you on that. But I think just, again, making sure that you follow through with just doing what you've done here, adding that layer mask in, bringing the original photograph in, adding the layer mask in, you'll be in good shape. And the same thing with you, Eric. Your design looks great. It looks like, though, you want to make sure, in your case, you have the layer masks, but it looks like you accidentally deleted the background before you added the layer mask, which is something that happens often when you're learning with the layer mask. Just like Daphne, Joy, what you want to do is you just want to bring in that original photograph into the design, and then you're going to select it using the quick selection tool, and then apply your layer mask. Again, just like the video instructions for this assignment back in the previous instructions. This video right here will walk you through it. Okay? All right, so let me know if you have any questions, but otherwise everyone, I think, is on the right track. Just again, remember the layer mask, getting these layer masks is the most important thing, and just keep practicing. And Daphne, Joy, for yours too, in addition to the layer mask, just remember to add the name of your character, and you've got some space either above or below. With yours, actually, I would also just enlarge your design a little bit more. Just to, you want to fill the page, add the text, and then make your design a bit bigger, because that's going to be the centerpiece of your design, is the character.